Good evening and welcome to our week one GoTo for Advanced Entertainment Law. Tonight's GoTo session, we are looking at intellectual property. For those of you who are joining us via the archive, I just want to give you a quick heads up. You want to make sure that you download this file from Dropbox. If you review the Dropbox file on Dropbox itself, you may end up with a mere 15-minute preview. Particularly the discussion dealing with assignments is at the very end of the session. So you want to make sure you download the session so you do not miss anything from the GoTo. For those of you joining live, thank you so much. You can feel free to chime in with questions along the way. Those of you joining via archive, definitely feel free to reach out. We'll revisit the communication methods towards the end of the session. So tonight we're going to just delve into intellectual property. So for intellectual property, we're going to go through and look at four forms of intellectual property, or as we refer to it, IP. So the first type of IP we're referring to are trademarks, dealing with brands. Next, we look at patents, dealing with sciences and technologies. Then we move on to look at copyrights, dealing with methods and ways to protect the arts. And then lastly, we deal with trade secrets, and trade secrets are going to look at competitive advantages that your company would hold. All four of these are categories that many of your companies will work in or work with as far as creating content. So whether you're creating this content for yourself or potentially for clients, your business will at least have a base number of these elements that will come into play to protect, as an example, your own branding content and elements, as well as certain content you would create. So we'll go ahead and start off first and foremost with our trademarks. And for those of you who are in a space where you are working with branding or marketing, for those of you who have already decided on a company name or company brand, trademarks are going to be an important aspect of what your business is going to build. Again, going back to the legacy, as well as what your company may be selling off if you're going through and pitching different brand names to other companies. Your trademark ultimately is a source identifier. When you see a name brand or hear a brand, see a logo, you will look or hear whatever that is, and it will then give you some sort of information for some sort of a reaction. So as a quick example, I have about 5 on the session with me tonight. If you could go ahead and type into the message box one brand that is one of your favorites. A favorite brand. Toyota, Kith, Apple, WWE. Okay, I'm seeing different brands pop up. GoPro. Any brands that have popped up that we're not familiar with? All right, we need some help on one of the brands here. What industry are we in with that brand? Perfect. So you have a clothing line that isn't necessarily globally recognized, New York-based clothing line. It serves as a source identifier. When you see the brand, you know what it is, you know what they do. So Toyota popped up, Toyota makes vehicles. GoPro popped up, WWE, etc. So you have an idea of what the product line is, what the good or service is, based on this source identifier. It speaks not only to the product or service, but it also speaks to qualities thereof. So when you hear the name of a brand, you may have a reaction to that brand, good, bad, or otherwise. In the news lately, we've had a few brands who've stepped forward to try and protect themselves, to try and re-up the investment that the community and society have in their brand. If you've seen any news stories over the past few months dealing with brands trying to triage and repair, I think probably the best industry to use as an example is the airline industry. We've had a number of different airlines that their brands have been featured in a light that they don't necessarily love. So they're going back through and trying to explain qualities, products, and services that they offer that would give them a greater competitive advantage to others due to flight delays, due to individuals being removed from flights or being altercations on the plane, etc. So a lot of these brands are doing a good bit of work to make sure that there's good quality control. And great point, Wells Fargo is another brand that's had a lot of focus thrown onto them when it comes to the way that they were handling accounts. I think is probably the nicest way to explain that. So you have a number of companies that are in this space trying to fix or trying to support their brand. The goal is, as a company, to build a brand and hopefully not have to deal with any sort of challenges or concerns with the quality of the brand. Our goal is to always be held in a positive light. Your trademark is going to be something that is distinctive and outstanding. Stanford did a survey a number of years ago asking children from the ages of 2 to 14 to look at logo designs, those visual manifestations of brands, and to identify brands based on that. So as an example, they showed them the swoosh, that's the logo for Nike. They showed them the golden arches, which are affiliated with McDonald's. They showed them the mermaid, that is the logo for Starbucks. And it was interesting because even the 2-year-old group knew that when they saw that logo for Starbucks, they didn't know it was Starbucks, but they knew it was coffee. And when they asked the toddlers, those of you who have kids, nieces, nephews, friends with kids, it was pretty interesting to see that when they saw it is a mermaid, they saw that mermaid in the circle. Some of the little kids replied that they knew that coffee was a drink. I think my favorite answer was one of the kids said, coffee, it's what makes mom happy. So you have that affiliation with the product. You see the logo, you know what it is. So for the toddler, they don't necessarily understand what coffee is or any of the interminglings of it. They just understand coffee equals happy mommy. So bless their little heart, that's the quality of the product that they draw from it. But that for them, the toddlers, that logo was outstanding to them. The Starbucks logo and the McDonald's logo actually tied in the survey as being most recognizable. Coca-Cola's Santa logo was not the first most recognized logo. So when you're looking even with little kids, the Starbucks logo actually was more recognizable, as was McDonald's, than the Santa logo that you had from Coca-Cola. So you have some interesting mixing and mingling of these different brands, but it shows you the importance of having something that's identifiable and making sure that there are good feelings and thoughts that go along with this trademark. So your trademarks are going to cover a lot of different categories. As source identifiers, the number one thing that most companies will register is their name first. So if you think on 4.0 of all of the different trademark elements that you see for the university, you have Full Sail University branding, you have Full Sail online branding, you have the airplane logo, you have a lot of different pieces of trademark elements that can come into play. Most businesses out of the gate are going to prioritize protecting their name first. Trademarks, if available in your state, majority of states do have trademarks. State trademarks are going to cost approximately $100. Federal trademarks are going to cost approximately $300 for the application. So for our trademarks, if you're paying $300 for each name, each logo, each slogan, it adds up pretty quickly. So companies have to prioritize. Typically, the name is top of the list. Most companies then will debate logo slogan. If they can only afford a handful of things, logo and slogan then get debated. Is it more important that we have the visual manifestation, like Starbucks Mermaid, or do we need to have the slogan, like McDonald's has the I'm loving it slogan, or Nike has just do it, something like that. So we start to sort through, unless your business has unlimited income, and start to prioritize our legal fees and expenses to be able to register these different marks. Now, one other important aspect to know about trademarks before we drop into some of the other categories that might not apply as broadly, trademarks are registered per international class. International classes are categories of use. So if you have a name brand like a Coca-Cola, to drop Coca-Cola into the trademark space, you would pay approximately $300 to register Coca-Cola in the beverage category for trademark. If you then wanted to register Coca-Cola in the clothing, the apparel division, that's a different $300 registration because it's in a different category or international class. Clothing is going to be separate from beverages, which would be separate from other types of merchandise and memorabilia. So just as a heads up, particularly for my company that's making boxes, if you're making any custom products, know that certain categories are really good for merchandise and memorabilia. I actually cut my teeth in part working for Planet Hollywood International back when they had over 200 locations. Bruce and Demi were still married. Schwarzenegger had a maid, but there was no talk of any sort of baby action anytime soon. It was a long, long time ago. With that being said, we would always go through and get into discussions about bundling branding for trademark. So when we would have dialogue and discussions about trademark and branding items, if it fell under the same international class or category, it gave us a really good reach, and we didn't have to go through the process of registering something new, going through the process with the federal government, paying the application fees, etc. So if you have a company that's doing a merchandise type structure, if you're creating merchandise, if it all falls under the clothing category, as an example, you have some room to maneuver. You aren't constantly registering new trademarks. So something to consider. Mascots are our next category. I don't specifically know that anybody on my live session would have a mascot, but every now and then I have a student who is seeking to have some sort of a mascot for their business. If you're looking to have a mascot, my hometown has a bank, and the kids' banking program is overseen by a mouse called Cheddar. He teaches you how to store up and save up your cheddar so you'll have cheese to use in the future. It's the weirdest mascot in the universe, but they decided to do it a few years ago. I have no idea. I went home and they had this mouse standing outside waving a sign about saving your cheese or something. It's a mascot that the bank uses if they want to go ahead and protect it under trademark, if it's something identifiable, if people see this mouse and they don't think of Disney, they don't think of Chuck E. Cheese and Skee Ball, then they can go ahead and enter into the fray to get the mascot protected. Those of you who are sporting fans dealing with collegiate sports or even some of the pro teams, mascots can definitely be distinctive items and brand identifiers. As a University of Florida Gator grad, definitely the Gators are a pretty big mascot, at least here in the state of Florida and beyond. One of our other categories is dealing with characters. And if you want to learn some of the ins and outs of characters, you can gain a lot and get a lot of tips from thinking about what would Disney do. Disney has a vast reach when it comes to their trademarks and characters. Those of you who are on the live session, type in one character from Disney that you know. One character. Okay, I'm getting the Fab Five overwhelmingly here. Goofy, Donald, Tigger. What else does Disney own? Jack Sparrow, absolutely. New Pirates movie, out in the mix. All the Marvel stuff, all the Star Wars stuff. Disney's got their hand in a lot of different categories. So because of that, when it comes to characters, Disney oversees thousands and thousands of characters. You can learn a couple of quick tips from Disney. And my campus cohort, we had that discussion about California earlier today. One important thing to note, Disney actually registers their trademarks typically out of Anaheim, California, making their trademarks on paper California-based marks. With that being said, the largest retail location that Disney houses is here in Central Florida. Our Disney Springs store, as well as our stores that span across the 4 parks here, provide a large retail footprint for the brand. With that being said, as a Florida resident, When I get a phone call to please drive out to Disney Springs and purchase a gift for somebody's baby from one of my family members in Ohio, even though I'm taking my Florida license to a Florida store and buying something that's in Florida, since the trademark is California based, it makes it easier for a federal trademark to be renewed because we can show sales across state lines. A California based trademark is being purchased in Florida. It's a pretty brilliant structure. With their online purchasing, it makes it even easier because when you ship to my home in Florida, then you have instant proof of where I'm located. You don't even have to worry about my driver's license or scanning my band that gives you data or anything else. Now, with this, Disney also has gotten pretty creative. Those of you who are on the GoTo, if you're familiar with the Disney Vault, Disney will release films in an incremental setup. They'll also go through and refresh or relaunch content from time to time. It's a brilliant way for them to re-energize a trademark because trademarks are good for a decade at a time, and we need to be able to prove use in commerce every 10 years, as well as some sort of a promotion, typically, to get sales of that commerce. So if Disney, hypothetically, let's say, I don't know, makes a live action version of Beauty and the Beast as an example, they'll go through and they'll do a release of that content live action. Trust me, I was foolishly on property the weekend that Beauty and the Beast released. There were more people in yellow dresses than I've ever seen in my entire lifetime and probably will never see again. With that being said, it was a huge energy for everything Beauty and the Beast. Now that they have the launch of Pandora, of the Avatar Island at Animal Kingdom, you see a huge insurgence of Avatar stuff that's being promoted and sold. So for Disney, it's a good way to pair up, to partner, to be able to build and promote their brands and sell. They will also do different releases, direct to DVD or something equivalent, VHS, etc., depending on their time frame, to be able to show remastered, absolutely, or additional content or something like that, behind the scene features, etc. Because that content being released will then re-energize. You have parents or grandparents who want to see the film with children or grandchildren. You also will see individuals who want to see what the extra content is or what's been revamped in it. So it will re-energize and help then push brand placement. One of the other things which masterfully is done is carpooling characters in really interesting and unique ways. You do have to show sale across state lines every decade for a federal mark. So to be able to place multiple characters on a piece of merchandise makes life easier. So the initial characters that were getting listed, the Tigger, the Goofy, the Donald, those characters usually are seen as a grouping. When you put Mickey and Minnie with them, you get the Fab Five. So with that Fab Five, we can go through and stick those characters on products, and we can say if we put them on a baseball hat, on a t-shirt, on a pair of shoes, on a keychain, on a bumper sticker, etc., we can go through and argue to the trademark office, here is Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck, Tigger, and Goofy being utilized in all these different places. Probably one of the coolest things I've seen to make sure that trademarks have been used in commerce over the span of a decade. Disney did a wall clock that was the evolution of Mickey Mouse over time. Moment of confession, I'm not the world's biggest Mickey Mouse fan. It was a really cool design because dealing with the trademark side of things, it's an awesome way to be able to capture 12 different mice on one piece of merchandise, and clocks will cover a lot of collectible merchandise type categories. So it's a brilliant way to make sure those characters are safeguarded. And that's exactly why they do it. Absolutely. That's precisely. So we want to make sure we re energize content to make sure that the trademark has sale across state lines so we can keep that trademark renewed from decade to decade. If you do not have sales on an item over a 10-year window, you cannot go through the renewal process. We actually had an issue with this. It's been almost a decade ago now with Betty Boop. One of the Betty Boop trademarks didn't actually have sales across state lines over the span of a decade. Very quickly, the trademark owner had to show sale across state lines and go through and make sure that they were able to recapture that mark. Yes and no. As far as somebody else trying to reappropriate it and use it for themselves, yes and no. We do look at some seniority aspects for use, but we also look at application dates. So if somebody is going through and re-registering within a short abbreviated window of time, you can be safe. If it's something that's more lengthy, if it's in a different category, then we may allow permission for registration if it's a different international class and time has passed. If it's the exact same international class and it's been 2 days, trademark office will push back and say that there's a potential likelihood of confusion based on same category, same class. So if somebody had picked up Betty Boop the next day and said, hey, USPTO, this has fallen into public domain, it was abandoned, they didn't have sales over the past decade, I want it now, it causes a number of issues because to register, you either have to show an intent to use in commerce within the next 36 months, or you have to show use in commerce in the past. If it just expired the day before, use in commerce would be infringement, so that's a no-go. To register an intent to use would be a challenge, particularly if it is a recently expired trademark. For additional trademark categories, your company may have colors. Some companies are very into the color structure within their business. Other companies are not necessarily as sensitive. I always like to give the example of Tiffany's with the blue colored boxes that they utilize, as well as UPS with the color brown. So when you're looking at Tiffany's jewelry with the robin's egg blue and UPS with their shade of brown, Coca-Cola with their shade of red, it's very distinctive. It's used within their categories. So it's just another aspect to consider. We also look at scents. With scents, we're looking at fragrances, which can be protected under trademark. Those of you in the music side of the world, it seems like every single person who is a performer has some sort of a fragrance at some point in their career nowadays. Numbers can be protected. Again, sticking in the music space, 311 is a great example of numbers being protected. And then our last two categories are collective and certification marks. With our collective marks, our collective marks work with a group or an organization. So collective marks would apply to things such as Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Toastmasters, things like that, different associations, the National Bar Association, as an example, the American Bar Association. So collective marks apply to groups that would form with similar focus areas. Certification marks apply to endorsements. So if any of you on the session are certified, I know every now and then I'll have students who are certified in Pro Tools or Avid or Maya or something. They're certified in software. Certification is a company utilizing their trademark to put their stamp of approval on you. I have a comment dealing with sounds marks and Harley Davidson. Harley actually fought and got challenged during their trademark process. For sound trademarks, our most famous and well-established sound trademark are the NBC chimes. Harley's number one issue was that the Harley-Davidson sound, to have a sound trademark, it must be consistent throughout. Harley-Davidson sound is only as consistent as the person maintaining the bike, which is fundamentally problematic. With the NBC chimes, NBC just hits play on the same track forever. When it comes to anything that's mechanic, it's very easy to counter that by stating that it can be customized, altered, or changed. Trademark has to be used consistently and has to be able to be recognized consistently, which is why Harley had so many challenges trying to get that sound mark safeguarded. So you really want to think about things that are going to be identifiable within your company. Most of our companies are going to pick up the first few categories pretty quickly. When it comes to the second column, you won't necessarily see anything that's going to be a good or an obvious fit. For our trademark protection, just a couple of quick things to highlight. Keep in mind, as mentioned, you can register at the state or the federal level. A state registration is solely going to protect you within the boundaries of your state, which is important to know. Nowadays, so many of our companies are going to have social media pages, they're going to have websites. A state mark isn't going to give you the best protection in the world. If you are fixing shoes in a strip mall and you have zero intent to grow and all you have is your phone number somewhere listed on a phone directory, okay, state mark isn't a bad idea. But if your brand is going to have content broadcast online, if your company is building a website or other social marketing material, you're going online, you're going to cross state lines, you may have clients from other regions. It's a much better investment for a federal trademark. State marks are $100 for one state, federal marks are $300, and you pick up 50 states plus almost 100 other countries and all of our territories within the federal system here in the US. So it's definitely a worthy investment for the extra $200 to get that huge reach. Your trademarks, as mentioned, will give you 10 years of protection. They are renewable as long as you can prove sale across state lines. You can use a TM or SM as a superscript or subscript at any time you would choose. So heads up there, you can start using the TM or the SM as a superscript or a subscript already for any brand that you would have. You do have to wait for federal approval to use the RNA Circle. The RNA Circle is especially reserved for federally registered marks. It sends a different message as far as level of protection, level of vigor that the brand has had to go through to be approved. So you want to be very diligent with that. To use the RNA Circle without federal registration can be the basis of a fraud claim. It can also be the basis potentially to bar your registration. So don't use the RNA Circle unless you've gone through the entire application process and have been approved. You would pay $100 for the state, $300, give or take, for the federal registration. You do not have to register in both. A state registration will typically register within 2 to 6 weeks. A federal registration will typically register in about 18 months. Did that answer your question? Okay, no worries. So we're going to shift gears and look at the science side of the world of patenting. For my campus cohort, whom I met earlier today, I don't know how much patenting is going to fall into the fold. You never know where winds will take you, so it's important to know the different subcategories of intellectual property, but I wouldn't struggle to try and find something to put in your IP audit because it may not be a good fit. So under patent, we have 3 types of patents. First and foremost, we have a utility patent. Utility patents deal with technology and they are good for 20 years. Utility patents will protect everything from the formula and delivery mechanism for the EpiPen allergy device to the method that Amazon uses for their one-click platform to technologies dealing with filming a scene in the Matrix. You have a wide gamut of things that utility patents will survey and protect. For 20-year protection, you get that technology safeguarded. You have an exclusive right to be able to exploit it. Design patents are good for 14 years. Design patents will cover non-technical, non-useful elements of a design. So as an example, if anybody on my session is familiar with hood ornaments, those 3D sculptural elements that sat on the front of car hoods for a number of years, you still see them with Bentley, with Jaguar, with a few of the brands, you'll see those design elements coming into play. So those can be protected under the 14-year design patent. There is zero functionality. They're merely there because they look cool. So with our design patents, we can safeguard them. Interestingly enough, a lot of those hood ornaments were sculptural 3D versions of logos. So you actually saw a lot of those hood ornaments protecting as a patent as well as a trademark. And ultimately, by having both the patent and the trademark, if somebody made a copy of that hood ornament, they actually would get sued for both patent infringement as well as trademark infringement. You don't see the 3D hood ornaments used to the same extent anymore. They are horribly not aerodynamic. Rolls-Royce does still have them because I don't know many people who have a Rolls-Royce who are worried about aerodynamicness. They're more focused on their awesomeness, which is cool. So you have the design elements starting to fade, move into different categories. Nowadays, design patents you actually see on a lot of product packaging, like kids products that are shaped like characters and things like that. It's kind of the new version of the hood ornament of sorts. Our last category is protecting plant patents, and plant patents are good for 14 years as well. They protect specifically lab created plants. We've seen some really interesting things created over the years. We've seen very recently in the restaurant world, a group created a lavender colored pineapple. When you cut it in half, it's a light purple. We had another company that created white strawberries. Um, Not to kill the magic, but one of the best examples categories for plant patents, anything that's genetically modified. Genetically modified agriculture, by definition, is eligible for plant patents. One of our biggest groups for plant patents is Monsanto. So, if you're familiar with the brand Monsanto, they do a lot of customization and optimization of seeds and different categories of plants to try and be able to get those genus and species, etc., popped out into different categories. So just a heads up, it's good for 14 years. They can go through and utilize. Plant patents also have grown in registration, particularly in states like Colorado because of legalization of marijuana. So just a note there, it has to be something that's lab created, not naturally occurring. So it has to be something that's very specific. If any of you have a super hyper interest in botany or a background in botany, you feel free to let me know. I can go ahead and give you some additional background on this. But plant patents are a third category, not necessarily going to apply to any of our businesses. I've only had one student that this applied to in my tenure at the university. So definitely few and far between, but still good to know. Utility is good for 20 years. Design and plan are good for 14. Our utility patents are what we will use most frequently. We see utility patents on all sorts of different things. If you look at items that you own, your cell phone, your computer, any other technology that you would own, you will see patents all over different items. If you search online or on the product itself, letting you know that things are protected and should not be used. So any of the functional items that you would have, technology as a blanket is a good example. Your utility patents are going to require three things. Number one, for a utility patent, it has to be something that's new. And our USPTO is going to go through and look at your utility patent if you're applying. And the first thing they'll want to do is see novelty within your industry and category. So they are going to go through to confirm that whatever your technology is something that's new within your market. So if you're creating something, as an example, in the live show market, you're creating some new lighting technology. You have to show that this lighting technology is not something that was borrowed from existing content, not repurposing something that's already existing, not taking concepts that you saw from a trade show overseas and trying to register them super fast here in the States, etc. So you want to look at the fact that the utility patent, we're going to look to make sure it's something novel within your market. Secondly, we look at the usefulness. It's utility, so it has to be useful. We want to see what the useful purpose of the patent itself will be. So when it comes to utility patents, we need to see that useful aspect. What problem is it solving is part of the application process. Know that the use doesn't have to be the end marketed purpose of the product. So you can actually register based on one utility aspect, and you can market and take it into sales with a completely different useful aspect. So it's something you don't see a ton, but you do see every now and then. So just a quick heads up. Lastly, it has to be non-obvious. With a utility patent, the last concept dealing with non-obviousness, here we expand beyond your individual category within your industry, and we now expand and look at other industries as well. So if the lighting element that I'm registering has something to do with lenses or lens coatings, as an example, Not only are we going to look at lighting that's used in live shows, on film sets, etc., we may also look at lighting designs that are used in a residential home setting. We may relate this to headlights. We may relate this to lenses on microscopes or flashlights. We might move into a whole bunch of other categories that aren't necessarily what would fall within your same industry. We're going to look at other categories that would fit in opposing spaces to make sure you aren't just taking something off of an existing product and using it in a different way. We want to ensure that this is truly novel to your industry as well as novel to our businesses as a whole. It's not just a repurposing of something. For patent protection, you are receiving an exclusive right, or if you prefer, a monopoly, to manufacture, use, and sell whatever this product would be. Some companies, when they receive a patent, want to allow anybody to manufacture, anybody to use, anybody to sell, because the timeline is pretty prohibitive. It's 20 years for utility, 14 for plant and design. So due to that fact, some companies want to really push items through to a fast extent. Other companies are more concerned with supply and demand, limiting the supply as a whole, really focusing on quality manufacturing, quality distribution channels, limited customer usage. So it really just depends on the company and the products. Patents are solely federal, whereas trademarks are allowed to be registered at the state level. Patents and copyrights are federal registration, so you want to be aware of that. And patents aren't renewable. The whole purpose of patent is to advance our useful sciences. So to be able to advance our useful sciences, you have 20 years of protection. You're protected during that window of time, then you need to advance. Nowadays, technology moves way faster than the 20-year window, but we do have certain companies and categories that will stay above the curve on this, but not to the same extent. As an example, as your cell phone technology improvements. If you purchase any sort of detergent, laundry detergent, kitchen soap, if you purchase shampoo, etc., any of our cleansers, you'll see different renewals or different improvements, I should say, I apologize, different improvements in formulation, and they'll go through and make those improvements in formulation to be able to expand upon their patent protection, to be able to gain new patent protection. So as an example, if you look at laundry detergent, they've shifted around the formulas since the days of powder formula, as an example, for our big brands. And now they're looking at different concentrations and different delivery systems, different functionalities that can be protected under patent. They're constantly looking to evolve and change. Although those old products are still being sold, they have the trademark attached to them, but no patent. The newer versions now are being housed with patent protection. We then move on to copyright. Copyright is probably one of our biggest categories for most of you because of the fact that you will be creating content that will be viably able to be protected under one of the 5 categories of protected arts. So protected arts will include sound recording, textual works, performing arts, visual arts, and serial works. So we have these 5 main categories. If your company is dealing with anything creating written works, any sort of performance, video content, 2D, 3D artwork, audio content, recordings, podcasts, anything like that. You've got a lot of different categories that will fit in this mix. So to give you just a few examples, books, ads, and programming code can be protected under the literary works category. Scripts, manuscripts, and videos will be protected under the audiovisual or performing arts category. Choreography, including mime performance and dance routines, can be protected under performing arts. 2D and 3D artwork will fall under visual art. This will include sculptures, drawings, paintings, photography, etc. Blueprints also will fall under that. Compositions, melody, lyrics, and performances will fall under sound recording in part and performing art in part. What if the performance is from a third party? If you have their consent to record them, and this is actually kind of a BOGO question because it applies to your business and it applies to my broadcast business. So Shout out for asking a question that serves your company and a classmate's company. That's awesome. If you are recording a third party's performance, if you have consent of that third party to go through and register and protect the performance, you can have ownership of that individual performance. Our competition shows are probably the best example of this. So any of our reality shows that have talent competing against each other, those performances are owned by either the production company and or the network. The performer does not actually have any ownership in that performance. The best analogy I can make, if anybody on the live session has ever hired a photographer, photographers are in the practice of charging for the raw files, or what we used to refer to as negatives. They would charge for those because of the fact that once you get that content, you're not requesting prints, you're not ordering anything from them, so they will charge a premium. They get to own the content because if you are the one, as an example, if your venue or business is setting up the cameras and staging the lighting to record those performances, a lot of your intellectual property is going into structuring having that performance captured, which is why you would own that intellectual property for that performance itself. And I have a comment dealing with websites. Websites are going to actually span a number of different categories of copyright. So as an example, the About Me page or any information that's just a written prose format, that'll be protected as a literary work, as a textual work. If you have any musical content could fall under sound recording and or performing arts. If you have video content of any type, you have a commercial, you have any sort of videos that would be built onto your page, that would fall under audiovisual performing artwork. If you have photography that's built into your page, maybe you have headshots of your founders or photos around your business location or something of that nature, those will typically fall under visual arts. So you can actually maneuver through all of these different things. Websites for 12 months for a calendar year. Is that a question? Right now we're on the copyright side of things. Your trademark, you are not updating your trademark. Your trademark should be consistent in its use. If you make any alterations or changes, you actually have to go through the registration process for that new trademark. Your trademark, you have to be able to show use across certain windows of time. It does not necessarily have to be every single 12-month window. You do have to show cross sales across state lines to make sure that you include protection, but you need to do that in an incremental basis. So it depends on where you are in the application process. If you go 12 months in one day, depending on what those 12 months are, you could be okay. You could have issues with your mark. You could be okay. For copyright, however, copyright doesn't have the requirement of sale across state lines. Let me answer that by giving you an example. And for those of you, the online cohort listening to the archive, I apologize for a little bit of choppiness. I'm dealing with a concussion, so I'm a little slowed down. If I can answer with an example, because that might clarify. If your company is a branding company, your own brand is going to be a trademark. So let's say Full Sail has a branding agency. So Full Sail branding agency would be protected under trademark. They would be doing business as Full Sail branding industry. They would be registered as a trademark as Full Sail branding agency. With that being said, if FSBA, to make life easier, if FSBA gets approached by me and I say, hey, listen, I need a logo for my company. It's a law firm. I want something that's classic. I'd love it to be based off of the scales of justice. Here are my 4 colors that I want to use. Go give me some proofs. Give me some sample designs. If they go through and they send 10 sample designs, They give them to me for review, and I pick one to use as my trademark. I'm going to take that logo that they designed for me. I will register it as a trademark. It is my source identifier. It is my brand. However, in the contract, for them to create that group of samples, FSBA can make the request, hey, any of the individual brands that we create for you as a sample, we have the right to copyright those, put those in our catalog, make derivative works, put them in our demo reel, utilize them on our website as sample categories that aren't actually being in use, etc. So you can actually copyright work that is not being used by your client in a branding type sense versus the brand itself. So if my company is creating brands, I can't trademark a brand that I create and give it to Coca-Cola for them to use Coca-Cola and me hold the trademark. That gets really complex and nobody really benefits. It can get really cumbersome really quickly. But if you have 15 different categories, you want to note that you can put things into your copyright registration to put into your portfolio or lookbook. That was kind of what I was puzzle piecing together. So I was hoping that would make sense. So that way you can safeguard your prior works. Copyright is good for your life plus 7 decades. So there is no renewal process since it actually continues on past death. There's some lobbying going on right now actually to try and extend it even further by certain groups. So you don't have any sort of renewal structure. So if you're using it as portfolio work content, portfolio work that you've done, as long as it is not containing intellectual property of third-party companies, if it is, you just need to go through and have a release so individuals know that they're granting you permission to use it as part of your portfolio or your lookbook. You can go through and actually copyright that content. So definitely an aspect to consider. Excuse me. We then move on to look at copyright registrations. With copyright registrations, you'll register through copyright.gov. Copyright.gov is going to be our copyright website, which will allow you to register any types of work, sound recordings, performance arts, literary works, etc., those that were listed on the prior slide. It gives you the ability to provide federal notice and identification. And most importantly, your copyright registration gives you access to the courts, statutory damages, which is a mathematical formula for us to calculate how many exposures, how many views, how many copies were made of it, and multiply it times a number. Our smallest number that we use under standard statutory damages is $750 per copy. So if you have a YouTube video that has 1,000 views, you take 1,000 times $750. That's the bottom basement of our statutory damages. Be careful what you post online. You also have attorney's fees as another aspect of copyright registration. You can request your legal fees to be covered as well. Copyright registrations cost about $60. In all seriousness, they make really awesome graduation gifts. So you definitely want to consider that over time. When it comes to images registering in a catalog, as an example, if you're registering some sort of photo library in the audio side, if you're registering a sound effects library, you can register a collection or a group. You will pay an additional fee, and there are some lowered protections based on that group registration. Anything that will be iconic or stand out for your business, you would want to go through and register separately. So as an example, some of the photographers I work with, they'll go through and register all the photos from different photo shoot projects, either individually or by month or by quarter, depending on the scope of their business. They'll take the showpiece items, the ones that are going to hang on their website, be on the splash page of their website, be in the lobby of their studio. Those are going to be registered and protected separately since they are showpiece photos. So just some things to kind of think about when it comes to the registration process. For copyright protection, you do get 5 rights. So you get the right of reproduction, the ability to make copies of items. So with reproduction, you decide whether you want one autographed copy of an item or if you want 1 million digital copies of the item to spread around the world. When it comes to reproduction, as well as the distribution element, the publication element, probably our biggest arguments dealing with reproduction and publication that I have seen over the past month was dealing with the release of a handful of episodes of one of the Netflix specific shows. If you saw any of the news stories regarding a certain number of episodes of the Orange is the New Black, the new series, were leaked out, and there was some concern about copies. People were downloading and making copies. It was published outside of the release window. There were some different issues that came into play. We see it with game releases, film releases, all sorts of content. Digital makes it easier for us to reproduce. It's what killed Napster, because people were making copies and copies and copies of digital files. Adaptation is our next category. And with adaptation, this is where we look at the evolution of content, where we're moving a product, a piece of content from a category to another category to another category. So with adaptation, this could be taking a comic book character, turning it into a live action TV show, turning it into an animated cartoon, turning it into a live action movie, turning it into a kids series or an audiobook or something like that. Adaptation moves us through all these different categories of placement and usage. If anybody on the live session has ever seen the movie Spaceballs, I know sometimes I have groups that are familiar with Spaceballs, are familiar with May the Schwartz Be With You and other favorite Spaceballs phrases. We had a movie that was a parody-based film that was a parody of Star Wars. And within that film, they talk about adaptation. And there's a scene where they're in this temple, and one of the characters is talking about how he can take his character and make all these different products. How you have the movie, and you have the t-shirt, and you have the cereal, and you have a flamethrower, and you have a kid's toy, and you have all these other products. And it's a good example of adaptation when we go into merchandising and other forms of distribution. You control the right of who can take your stuff and move it into different categories and how they'll exploit it. Publication is our next category. Publication looks at distribution. Distribution with an intent to make a profit. Be really careful in our industry. We have individuals who will make demo reels and pass them out, or demo discs, and they'll contain infringing content, and they'll put on the actual disc for promotional purposes only or something of that nature. You're giving a demo or portfolio over with the hope and intent of monetization. It is technically publication, so don't infringe under the argument that it's promotional, because truly it can be a publication. It can be deemed a publication quite easily, actually. Performance is going to cover any live performance, any video content. I know I have a couple of businesses that will deal with live performance or broadcast performance of content. And then lastly is display. And display typically is dealing with 2D or 3D artwork, paintings, sculptures, etc., dealing with art displays. Last category we have are trade secrets. And with trade secrets, here we're looking most commonly at formulas as well as processes or techniques. Probably some of our most famous trade secrets you would know from the food industry or the beverage industry. Coca-Cola Classic is a trade secret. Colonel Sanders' secret herbs and recipes for KFC is a trade secret. McDonald's Big Mac sauce is a trade secret. We have a number of different groups and companies that will have trade secrets with formulas as well as with process, method, or device. If we can keep a secret, a competitive advantage, secret under wraps and can financially gain from it, our company will benefit over time. So when we're looking at trade secrets, we're looking at something that has 3 specific elements. So number 1, it has to have financial value as a secret. The fact that it's not broadly known gives us additional financial value. Secondly, it has to be ascertainable by proper means. This means that there has to be a right way to learn it. And then lastly, subject to reasonable security precautions. So you have to have in place security precautions. Our big donut chains, if any of you are fans of Dunkin' Donuts or Krispy Kreme, I know sometimes I have students who have an alliance to one versus the other. If you look at Dunkin' Donuts and Krispy Kreme, Dunkin' Donuts a number of years ago did this media thing where they relocated the recipe for one of their most famous and beloved donut recipes. And they had the stereotypical guy with a metal briefcase handcuffed to his arm getting on a little jet plane to move the recipe from one location to the other. Krispy Kreme, which is getting a crazy shout out right now in my chat box, Krispy Kreme said those people at Dunkin' Donuts are just bananas. We don't put our recipe all in one place at one time. We subdivide our recipe into different pieces and parts for you to be able to find it. It's kind of like almost an American adventure of sorts. You have to find various pieces in various locations. The recipe doesn't go with the ingredients, etc. So they take really high precautions to try and protect the mystery that is the Krispy Kreme original glazed donut. To get access to that, there are all sorts of requirements and restrictions. It is not widely known, widely distributed. So we're gaining financial value based on that protection and that exclusivity. Now, one thing you have to watch out for is reverse engineering. So of my live session, just a quick Y for yes or N for no. Anybody on my live session ever want to know how something works so you tore it apart as a kid? I have a yes instantly. And a no. You want to know how something works so you tore it apart. How does the toaster work? How does, hopefully not like, how does the TV work or how does my video game station work or something? Don't do this to your laptop. I think Apple would get super mad. Car technology, any sort of, maybe mechanical equipment in your kitchen, something like that. You can go through, and if a piece of technology isn't protected or an item isn't protected, you want to consider the fact that if you have a physical item that's not protected by patent, you run the risk, if it's protected by trade secret, of somebody tearing it apart and trying to reverse engineer it. We take a screwdriver to it, we take apart all the pieces, we figure out how it's made, and we start making it because it's not patent protected, so we're not infringing on that patent, which is terrifying. We actually saw a company called Sharper Image. If any of you remember Sharper Image, they were a technology company, kind of like a Brookstone almost, if you're familiar with that brand, that would create different technology solutions for around your home. They sometimes would release a product into the market without patent protection, and every now and then they would have an issue with reverse engineering, because if somebody goes through and figures out the secret, it's gone forever. One of the best examples of reverse engineering, if any of you do have a favorite restaurant recipe or brand product recipe, if you search online 9 times out of 10, you will actually find a recipe of how to recreate that in your own kitchen. Somebody is going through and taking the dish from the restaurant as carry out, trying to recreate and recraft it in their kitchen to try and make sure that they have the ability to make whatever that is at home. One of our former CDs, love this one steakhouse steak recipe, and went online and found the recipe and was all, haha, they used brown sugar and various other things, recreated it and swore that it was completely spot on. Some other individual went through and puzzle pieced together, this makes it taste the closest, so this must be right. Now, the flip side to this is misappropriation. Whereas you will directly register a copyright, trademark, and patent, and they will in turn be infringed. With trade secret, there is no registration, so there is no infringement. With trade secret, there is misappropriation. For misappropriation to occur, I have to prove that a trade secret exists. So I have to show that there's something of financial value ascertainable by proper means with reasonable security protections. I also need to show that it was acquired illegally, somebody hacked in or broke in, or via confidential relationship. I had an employee come into the company to try and find secret and confidential information. The last thing we look to is the fact that there is unauthorized use of that secret. I saw a brief blurb about a show on TV dealing with a former member of a religious organization who was talking about confidential information that she had gained as part of that religion, and talking about how it was used and what their focus was and so on and so forth, and that there was some discussion as far as unauthorized use of those secrets and potentially there being misappropriation claims. I haven't taken time to research it. It is in my phone on my to-do checklist, but it was kind of an interesting thing to see cropping up, that you would have this religion that would be called in, having one of their former members called into question potentially for a trade secret misappropriation. Kind of a interesting spin on this. For unauthorized use of the secret, you will usually see two typical situations. You'll see somebody who either hacks in or steals from an employer content to be able to use for their own benefit, or you will see them acquiring this content through misappropriation to be able to sell to third parties. We had an example where a chef got upset, took the cookbook, walked out of the restaurant, used the cookbook to build out the basis of the menu for his competing restaurant he built. Perfect example of misappropriation, unfortunately. We also have seen the exact same thing when an individual will go through and hack in or steal things from a system, and will go through and then threaten some sort of future use. Is that a typo, or am I missing something? Okay, just wanted to check. I was thinking in the back of my head, like, did I just say something weird? Hold on. Okay, no worries. Don't tap on Dory's glass, Josh. Not cool, man. Not cool. All right. So for safeguarding the trade secret, we want to go through and take some steps to protect your business. So a few things to consider. Number one, limit access. If you've ever heard the saying about loose lips sink ships, if you can limit access, if 5 people know, you have 5 chances of people telling people who shouldn't know. If 50 people know, you multiply that tenfold. So you want to limit the access. When you do have a trade secret, the fewer people have access to the information, the fewer opportunities to have content leaked. You want to consider non-compete agreements. These are going to be contracts that are signed by your employees. And with that being said, they are going to agree that they won't jump from your company to a competitor's company to work with them. We want to make sure we're able to safeguard the content that our company is working on, creating, etc. So if we can't have you jump across the street to work with our big competitor, that's going to help us. In addition to our non-competes, absolutely our non-disclosure agreements are going to make that list too. Non-disclosure agreements are going to limit what I can share, if anything, when I'm dealing with companies. And then lastly are exit agreements. Exit agreements are kind of the underlying, kind of sometimes missing contracts that you may want to consider. An exit agreement is a contract that's signed when an individual parts ways with a company. So with an exit agreement, you would go through and have somebody leaving your business, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. Yes, you can request it either way. Sign an exit agreement. The reason why I'm a champion of exit agreements, and this is going to be a little counterintuitive, but just roll with it for a second. When I started here at Full Sail, I've been with Full Sail for almost 15 years. When I started Full Sail, we had 7 associate degree programs. I was part of the team to launch the original business bachelor's completer. It was a 9-month program at the time in entertainment business. We were not a university. We were not online, let alone in FSO 4.0. We didn't have GoTo. We didn't have Turnitin. We didn't have Full Sail Live. Where my office sits is actually, it was a Steinmart up until the 3rd or 4th year I worked at the university. So needless to say, a whole bunch has changed. Exit agreements are super handy to catch employees who might have otherwise missed out on signing a non-compete or a non-disclosure. It also serves as a friendly reminder for those who did sign a non-compete or a non-disclosure, just to let them know what's up as they're parting ways with the business. I personally, having background both on transaction and litigation side, I'm a big fan of exit agreement because exit agreements usually will give you a good pulse point as far as if you're getting sued or not for an employment law issue. The other half of my law practice actually handles employment. So it definitely is a good litmus test to see if there's an issue or not. Now we're going to go ahead, shift gears, look at the assignments. So check FSO as well as turn it in for the dates and times for different assignments. We'll talk about dates and times for assignments as well as we maneuver through this content. But I want to go ahead and preview the week 1 assignments for my online cohort. These are going to be due on Sunday. For my campus cohort, check the class schedule as well as FSO for due dates for these upcoming assignments. So the first assignment we're going to look to is the IP audit assignment. And with our IP audit assignment, you're going to be identifying 4 pieces of content that your company will create and use within your business. So think about trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and patents that your company would create and use within your business. Maybe it's how you acquire clients or how you process transactions is a trade secret. Maybe it is dealing with the name of your business, or more importantly, the logo of your company, let's say. So if you're looking at this, you're going to explain how and why you'll protect it. So I'm going to give you a huge favor, value added for those of you who are sticking around at this point in the live session or in the archive, because this will save you points on the IP audit. If I am registering to protect my company's logo, I want to protect it to avoid any sort of infringement, of course, any misuse, etc. How I will protect it. Logos are protected how? How do I protect my company's logo? Exactly. I'm going to go through and I'm going to trademark my logo. Do not give me a whole fistful of points by utilizing any other form of intellectual property to protect your source identifier. Your logo is a source identifier. It always, always, always will fall under trademark. So you're going to go through and say, hey, I'm going to protect the logo of my company. If you actually have a logo, you're welcome to drop it in there. I can take a peek at it and make sure it doesn't look exactly like the Full Sail logo or something else that I've seen before and give you a little feedback. But with that being said, you also want to talk about the fact that you will protect it. Do you want to protect it state-based, federally, and why you want to protect? Once you review 4 pieces of content your company would create and would want to protect and safeguard within your own intellectual property audit, which almost functions like a resume for your business for the IP your company has amassed, you then will describe 1 item that your company will need a license, clearance, or permission to use and how these rights will be obtained. Now, some of your companies are going to have to get license, clearance, or permission for things like music or location releases or things of that nature to be able to capture intellectual property or broadcast intellectual property. If you are absolutely positively stumped, please don't do this because it's kind of lame, but if you are 100% stumped, nobody in this class should be doing business with stolen software. Everybody needs properly licensed software. It is the lamest answer in the world. Be creative, find a clearance, permission, or license that you would use to be able to get permission to use third-party trademarks, trade secrets, patents, or copyright. Software license, bottom of the barrel answer. So look at some of the other options you would have. For your industry liabilities vlog, you will be looking at 3 liabilities that you will face within your industry. There are 2 different ways that this paper can be written, so stick with me for just a second. If your company, and I'm trying to think of a company outside of my campus cohort, if your company is creating, trying to think of an example that I've seen recently in the news. It's doing a television production. I don't have a TV production in my classroom class that I know as of yet. So if you have a TV production that you're creating, you can assign this, you can tackle this assignment 1 or 2 ways. So I'm going to use a TV production as a hypothetical. I can either look at TV production liability risks and do a deep dive on 1 risk, but 3 different cases. So as an example, with TV production, I can look at 3 different cases dealing with copyright infringement. People who allege that they pitched a concept and it was stolen. So we had, if any of you are familiar with the show 6 Feet Under, that was on, I believe, HBO for a while. 6 Feet Under had a copyright contestant. We had a copyright contestant for one of the Ghost Hunter shows. We had a copyright contestant for Project Runway and a couple of reality shows. So I might look at trade secret or copyright infringement, depending on which form of IP it is, in 3 different examples. Here's a case for show A, here's a case for show B, here's a case for show C. These are all copyright issues. In my own business, because you need to apply it to your business, these are steps I would take to avoid this liability. The other thing you can do is you can do a survey of liabilities in your business. Some companies are going to benefit more from the survey than the deep dive. It really just depends on where you are in your market, what your intent is as far as your breadth of knowledge or depth of knowledge on this assignment. If you do survey, you can look at all sorts of cases. So as an example, we've had cases for wrongful termination based on age discrimination. We've had cases dealing with television, dealing with investment fraud, breach of contract, as well as copyright infringement. So I might pull a case dealing with age discrimination, pull a case dealing with sexual harassment. The news organization Fox has settled a couple of harassment claims dealing with their TV. So maybe I would look at sexual harassment, age discrimination, and breach of contract. So I would pull one case for each, I would talk about each, and then I would explain, here are different ways that my business will avoid this through HR policies, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to apply to your business, but you can either look at one liability, 3 examples within your market, or you can look at 3 different liabilities with a case example for each. But you want to make sure you're talking about either a decided case or something that's currently ongoing, just to talk about how in real life will apply. Don't write about something hypothetical, write about something that legitimately has or is occurring. You'll submit this via Word to FSO as well as to Turnitin. And this is an older slide, so I apologize. You don't need to post. You don't need to post. Some useful resources to consider. If you're looking for liabilities, look at some of the legal blogs. Hollywood Reporter Esquire is a really great source. If you haven't gone out to Hollywood Reporter Esquire, they will take a survey of liabilities from a bunch of different industries. So you'll see things dealing with copyright, dealing with contracts, dealing with finance, with employment, etc. So it's a good place to look. You can also look at FindLaw's blogs. FindLaw.com has a blog as well as a newsletter section that will send you updates and details. So that's also helpful. And then IPLJ, the Intellectual Property Law Journal, is another category, another source to consider. IPLJ, needless to say, is very IP focused. So it's dealing more with the nuances of intellectual property, more so than it necessarily is entertainment. Sometimes on IPLJ, you can see cases dealing with automotive trademark disputes or something of that nature. So it's not going to be the same as Hollywood Reporter, which is entertainment based all the time. You additionally can research industry sources. LexisNexis is a great resource, but you might also have scholarly journals within your own subsets of the industry that will discuss legal topics. You just want to make sure you're looking at a source that's credible. So just be aware of that. Credible sources are going to be key here. For my online cohort, you will be reviewing for your discussion board this week an interview that I did with a fellow chair emeritus, Julie Milhelm. She is an entertainment attorney who literally wrote the book on music law for 2 different jurisdictions, 2 different states, as we talk about some of the best practices and tips that you can utilize within your business. So you'll want to go through and review that. You'll want to apply those best practices and tips. Just a few of them, talk about how they can benefit you. Include analysis and response in your reply. Don't just give a virtual high five kind of thing. And also make sure you proofread carefully to maximize points. Make sure you are honoring the deadlines as well for discussion board. Make sure you post by tonight at 11:59 p.m. for full points on your initial post, and by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday for that response post. For my campus class, you will want to start reviewing upcoming notes for your upcoming assessments. We still have a few more slides to review for legal terminology, but you can start going through to prep for those assessments starting next week. For my campus cohort, we will also touch base and talk about the Make Your Case presentation, which is a live in-class presentation that you'll be doing in a couple of weeks in class, where you're selecting a case from a list that I'll post in the announcements, and then reviewing facts of the case, issues within the case, the court's analysis, and the final ruling. And then you'll also be reviewing a related case. So we'll talk more about that next class when I see you. For submission of assignments, some key things to note. Online class, all of your assignments are due before 11:59 p.m. Sunday, Winter Park, Florida time. Campus cohort, your assignments are due before the start of class. So if you have a paper that's due Monday morning, it's due Monday morning before class at 9 a.m. So you want to make sure you're completing the assignments prior to coming into class. That way, when you arrive in class, we can have some discussion as far as the assignment that was submitted. If there's any technical issues, I can grab the file from you right there live. I can also go through and touch base if I don't have your file to see what's up. So it's start of class. So campus cohort, keep that in mind. Assignments are due before the day of class that they're listed. So in this case, your classes are at 9 a.m. You want to make sure they're due and submitted before 8:59 p.m. or 8:59 a.m. since it's a morning class. So before that start of class is when they'll be submitted. Utilize APA format, quotations, citations, anytime you're using third-party sources, and access Turnitin to help you do a review. Your assignment shouldn't be more than 20% similar to existing content. So you want to pay close attention and make sure when you're submitting that anything that needs a citation is properly cited, and as well that you are not missing citations. Turnitin will actually show you similarities, which is super helpful. Submit via Turnitin as well as FSO. Hopefully everybody has had good experiences with both Turnitin as well as our new revamped FSO. But if you have a tech issue on either side of the platforms, you can always submit via the other to make sure you get your submission in. In addition to that, you can always submit to me via my email. My Full Sail email is listed, cwillard@fullsail.com, as well as my Google, which is my first name, CASSI, Cassie, and then law, LAW, @gmail.com. If I am on Messenger or Google Talk, you are welcome to reach out to me if you do have any questions, but you can utilize either email or FSO. The FSO platform, the new revamp, has gotten to be a much more streamlined system as far as Messenger. So you're welcome to send messages through the platform or via either of the email addresses to ask any questions that you may have. So for those of you joining via the archive, I want to thank you so much. Don't hesitate to reach out with any additional questions, and I hope you have a fantastic week. I look forward to a great month.